giving my life to my faith was a humongous shift for me, probably the biggest, because it gave me like that safety, that identity, and something bigger to trust on and fall on, and an actual word, an actual thing, you know, the Bible scripture to go to when those thoughts were running wild.
Hi, my name is Isabel Ball. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a certified eating disorder specialist with Into Place Therapy here in Arizona. Today, I'm here with Carina, who's a licensed master social worker here in the state, and she specializes in eating disorders and faith-based counseling. And she works with anxiety, depression, trauma, substance abuse, and of course, eating disorders too. She can also speak personally to the experience of having an eating disorder and going through eating disorder treatment and recovery. So, Karina, you and I know each other from having worked together at an eating disorder residential treatment center for a while there. And I've gotten to see firsthand how you work with your clients and how much hope that you have in people and how transformative that's been for a lot of people's lives. So I'm really happy to have you here and appreciate you coming on a personal level.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy.
So I'd love to start with your story. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with an eating disorder and what the treatment process was like for you?
Definitely. My story takes probably every twist and turn a story possibly can. I battled my eating disorder for about, again, pseudo recovery is such a weird thing. So there's not an exact amount of time, but about 15, 16 years. Starting when I was 8. Started, and it's weird because everything that happened when I was 8 kind of came full circle through my recovery to finally finding answers probably about 2 or 3 years ago. Because it started with a very like mystery illness. I one night when I was 8 years old I started not feeling good, but it was like a weird kind of not feeling good. My legs were shaking, my heart was racing, like I was sweating like profusely and didn't know what was wrong. So I walked to my mom's room, tell her I wasn't feeling good, and I just like passed out and started seizing on the floor. So they took me in the emergency room, ran a bunch of tests, couldn't find anything wrong. So they gave like a follow-up test to run. But that kind of started a spiral of like months of every night of my life feeling that way, that sweating, the shaking, the nausea, and I just didn't know what was wrong. My everything would black out. And so a bunch of tests, a bunch of medical stuff, and no one ever found answers to what was wrong. And the only thing that seemed to kind of make the symptoms start to subside a little bit was when we left the country for like our yearly summer trip. My dad led study abroad. No one really knew why. We didn't really question after that. We were just happy. It would only happen here and there at that point. But it did definitely start like my obsession with food. I was very scared of getting that feeling again. So I was very picky about what I ate. Caesar, it was kind of arfity. Like I'd only order Caesar salads because I knew that was something that like wasn't going to make me feel that way. I ate very small amounts, particularly at night, just out of fear of feeling that way. Just kind of this lack of safety in my body. And I'd start to kind of like want to prevent any mystery illness from happening again. So I started counting how many healthy things I had a day, how many unhealthy things I had a day. And granted, I was 8, in my mind, dinner that night, if it was pizza, it was healthy. It was dinner, but it was just kind of this mindset of like food and health and trying to control and find a sense of safety in my body anywhere I could find control. Kind of like skipping a little bit to fast forward to like my research in college, I came to find out about dissociative seizures and trauma elicited seizures. And I started talking to my therapist at the time about that. And through EMDR, pieces started to come out of memory. And turns out all of that was panic attack, dissociative disorders from a sexual assault that had occurred the day of that by my brother's friend. And so I started to pick apart stories of what happened that day from my mom, things that she had never told me because she didn't think it was true, didn't think it was a big deal. But we come to find out that was the truth. And so it makes sense. So between medical illness, medical mystery and that happening, there was just a deep lack of safety in my body from a very, very young age. So once the kind of symptoms of that went away, I was in middle school trying to find safety in my body through affection from others, a new boyfriend like every week, very, very inappropriate games of truth or dare, lots of other, you know, traumatizing like sexual encounters that did not necessarily need to happen. I think I blame myself for a lot because I put myself in those situations per se, seeking that affection, seeking that love that I just didn't have for my own self, seeking that safety that I didn't feel like I could give myself. And that was kind of led me down this path of I'm not living in alignment with my values. So then we went on a Grand Canyon trip down, a 2-week trip rafting down the Grand Canyon, because in my heart, I'm a nature girl. I'm not this like girly kind of, you know, sexually like promiscuous girl that I was kind of portraying myself to be. So it kind of reconnected me back with myself, but I still had this gap of like a need to be safe. So on that trip, I also learned a lot about quote unquote like health and like ingredients you need to avoid and things like that. Cause obviously every guide on a trip like that is going to be like a major, major hippie. Had a near death experience on that trip. We got pulled in a rapid that was like basically pulling us into like a boulder. The guide was like, this is it. This is the end. We're all dying. And somehow, just by the grace of God, it's called an eddy, like a bubble basically came up and pushed us out. But that was another time my brain did like that snap into this like dissociative. That's why I explain it very oddly because I don't really remember it. I just remember what the guide was saying and what the other people, our other friends in the boat were saying. But it snapped my brain into that. So between that, like my brain resnapping dissociatively and learning all this stuff about quote unquote health, that's what led me down the path of anorexia. So all of high school was just kind of an in and out battle of different treatment centers, very, very just unhealthy relationship with food, relationship with exercise, just desperately grasping to try to find a sense of safety in my body. So then after all the bouts of treatment, I found a way to kind of control in pseudo recovery through bodybuilding, where I was eating enough and whatever. Still very like being judged by my body is definitely not recovery. Then competitive CrossFit, just kind of battling in like this in between of I'm okay physically, but I'm still struggling. Like my life is still very much revolving around food and my body and exercise and nothing else. And that all kind of changed when I met my husband. All of a sudden there was someone that like I wanted to be able to eat with. I saw the hurt in his face when he'd like cook a good breakfast and I would just rush home at that point. He also introduced me to my faith, which I know we'll get into a little bit more, but that was probably the biggest turning point, finding out who I really am, kind of this sense of safety that I can't find in myself or anything else. And my recovery just kind of slowly started unraveling itself and growing from there. So I don't know, there wasn't like an exact day that everything became perfect and I was recovered. But just over the course of like 2020 to 2023, it just kind of folded into what I would say definitely full recovery at this point.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. That's a really personal story. And a long journey with a lot of changes and big moments that brought a lot of things up for you at these different points in time. And, something that strikes me too in what you're talking about, that disassociation, like how much of a defense mechanism that is for children and how it is protective in some ways. And so I guess is there any way in which you feel like it was protective throughout your life?
I mean, absolutely. I don't know what not only me, but like my family would have done if it came out at that point in time that was true. It was my brother's best friend, a family friend that we were so close to. I and it was before. Since then, this person has become very, very like I hate the word crazy, but just very a scary person, and everyone knows it now. But at the time, no one did. And so I think it did serve as a defense for myself, for my family, and I think that I don't know if my 8-year-old self could have really dealt with that. So even though, yes, it sucks that like it's been this whole time of like, sort of, I don't think it was all caused by that one person or that one event. And also, I know God's grace and God's plan. I would never in a million years be where I am now if it weren't for that and everything that had to go on in between finding out, the memories slowly coming up of what really happened. So um, I think it's frustrating at times, and also I know that God's plan led me to where I was meant to be, and my family as well. Since it happened so long ago, everyone's more in a place of like, oh, I mean, yeah, I guess that happened. Even me, when the memories started coming up, it wasn't. It was kind of like I was ready to know because I know something had been suppressed for so long. I was just ready to know, and it almost felt good instead of like scary and terrible. So, yeah,
Validating in a way.
very validating. Yeah.
And how do you explain the fact that your body became sort of the coping mechanism for all of it?
That is something that I've recently like come to, and it was actually a really wonderful client that like it was one of those moments where I was like, whoa, that's exactly like you helped me piece it together. But it's the fact that you don't feel safe inside of something that you physically cannot escape. Like you're living inside of it, and yet it is the very thing that is unsafe. Um, Whether it be it's been assaulted by someone out of like, out of your own control, whether it be a medical mystery per se of like, my body did this thing and no one knows what's wrong and I don't know how to control it from happening again. So I'm just going to try in every way I possibly can. Um, it's like feeling the least safe thing is the thing that you live inside of 24/7, always, and you can't escape from it. It's kind of the way that I would describe it. And I think the reason my eating disorders are super hard to treat and to recover from, but also not impossible. But
And even in your story, I think you're bringing up the really good point of like, it's a process and it's not a moment by any stretch of the imagination. And, we use the word recovery a lot. And for some people identify with that word, some people don't. Some people are like, I'm in recovery my whole life, right? But what does that word mean to you? And what do you feel is your experience?
so recovery, it's been so interesting because I remember actively competing in bodybuilding and also promoting all over my like bodybuilding social media. Like I'm a recovered, I'm recovered from an eating disorder, and I look back and I'm like, I was so far from recovered at that point. So I think recovery, I think of it as very like it's multifaceted, but there's three like main components. So like there's the physical recovery of like, yeah, you're not really close to going back into treatment physically, like medically compromised, right? There's also the behavioral recovery of, okay, so I'm not restricting my food, I'm not purging, I'm not binging, I'm not overtraining, whatever it may be. But I'm still very tied down to these thoughts. Maybe that's the time when someone finds another coping mechanism of they turn to self-harm or substance use, or they don't turn to another coping mechanism, but they're just depressed and anxious and it's really hard. And then there's the other side of like you no longer identify yourself with this thing. You have like a new identity, basically. Identity is such a big piece of eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. And I really think a lot of mental illness, that those labels and that identity. And so I think once that identity piece is gone, and even when there's thoughts of, I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, knowing what to go back to and what your ultimate source of truth is to really deflect from those thoughts. What's your proof that you are enough, or what you're doing is quote unquote enough? What does enough really mean? But I think the ability to deflect and no longer be a slave to those thoughts is really recovery to me because, I mean, yeah, I still totally get them all the time. That's, from like a biblical perspective, I'd refer to as like the thorn in my flesh, right? When trials happen, my brain instantly goes to, this is my fault. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. But my brain also doesn't go to, that means I need to starve myself. And that means I need to go work out for 6 hours. And that means X, Y, Z. My brain doesn't go there. It's because I have the evidence against the fact of like this not worthy, not enoughness. And I can fight against it even when those thoughts feel there and feel strong. So, yeah.
And, I think in eating disorders, working with a lot of clients, like some people have used the behaviors to sort of escape certain feelings and the sensation it brings up in their body. And so you're bringing up a really good point of like the not enoughness and being able to turn in a different direction than maybe you did in the past. So how have you learned to sort of sit in or navigate like really hard, uncomfortable feelings?
It's hard. It's hard, and some days I think aren't perfect. Like maybe I like lash out or yell in a way that I don't want to or things like that. But then it's also being able to come back and forgive yourself for those moments, and know that the people around you are safe enough people that they will forgive you too. I think so. There's not expecting perfection in that because hard emotions are really hard, but also knowing what to really the ultimate source of truth to come back to. So I reflect on like, okay, so my thoughts might be telling me this, my emotions might be running wild, and therefore, these are thoughts that my brain goes to, but I know the ultimate source of truth of like what the Lord says, who the Lord says I am, at the end of the day, and also knowing like weakness and like difficult emotions aren't bad. I mean, the Bible says my grace is sufficient for you. In your weakness, I am made strong. And so it's actually like strengthening God's grace in me those times that I am weak. And so I think reminding myself of that, of it's not bad to be weak. It's not bad to feel sad. It's not bad to feel mad. It's not bad to feel any of these things. And if I sit in it and just let God do the work that he's trying to do and trust that it's happening, even in the midst of this trial, I can get through that because I know that there's something going on that I don't quite understand yet. So I think it's kind of that patience and waiting that helps get through those really difficult emotions and being able to sit with them and not need to push them away or make them go away, even like momentarily.
And you're describing this higher power in a way, and I think that's a powerful piece of a lot of people's recovery, and that higher power can look many different ways. Is that something that you kind of discovered in your recovery, or what role has that played, and how did it develop?
Yeah. It definitely found in like within the midst of my recovery for sure. I think it started again, the physical side started even when I was still not doing the greatest things like mental health wise. But out of risk of treatment through bodybuilding and CrossFit and things like that. But then my husband was a really big role of like, I want something more with my life. I want, genuine love. I feel like I can actually find that. And faith came through my husband. So it was that turning point of like, I have two paths I can go down right now. And which one am I going to choose? And once I was like once I started reading the word and really starting to build that relationship, I realized like it was basically the answer to everything that I didn't have for so long. It was that safety that I didn't have in my body and could never find, no matter how much I worked out, no matter what weight I got to, it just wasn't going to be found. No matter how perfectly I ate or how clean my ingredients were, quote unquote, I was never going to feel safe enough in my body. And so it was that one thing, the only thing probably I think that could give me that, as well as the new identity. Like it gave me like my identity is in him. It doesn't need to be in anything else. It's not in my body. It's not in how perfectly I eat. It's not in how fit I am. At the end of the day, that's all gonna pass away. How am I gonna feel when I'm 80 years old? And I don't have any of that. Am I gonna feel like I have no worth when I'm in those last days? So it gave me that identity and that safety that were really the biggest drivers of my eating disorder. So that's definitely the role it played, but it definitely came in the midst of a lot of different aspects of recovery. It wasn't, again, I gave my life to Christ. I woke up the next day and everything was perfect and everything was solved. But it definitely played a really big part.
And you were talking about like being enough earlier. Did your spirituality answer that question for you, or redefine what enough meant?
That it definitely redefined what enough meant for me. It basically like taught me you can't earn your enoughness. You can't like earn your way to heaven through works or through whatever. You can't earn a relationship with Christ. It's already there. Like it's been there for all of time. No matter, even in the midst of the depths of my eating disorder, it was still there, even though I didn't know it and I didn't know him. And so it just redefined what enough meant in terms of like, I've been enough for him since like being knit together in my mom's womb. Like, I've been enough. And so I guess I just have to kind of accept that, even though it feels really uncomfortable and I really don't feel like enough. Nothing's going to, again, if nothing's going to make me feel like enough, I guess I would rather trust this thing that, um, I believe to be like this ultimate source of truth, as uncomfortable as it feels and unworthy as I feel. Um, I mean, murderers and, robbers and people who've done, even bigger crimes also are able to find that grace. And so I think just knowing that that grace is there and that grace is true, even when I don't feel like enough, it can't really be earned. So just redefining what enough really means.
And I actually didn't even know that you didn't grow up with the relationship you have now, maybe with a higher power. And so, um, are your parents religious, or what's the relationship been like with them, maybe now and then also when you were going through eating disorder?
Yeah. No, not at all. I mean, we went to church kind of like for fun until I was like 4. And then our pastor left and then we never went back. My mom grew up really strict Catholic and had not a great relationship with faith just in her life. And so she didn't want to put that on us. I think that's largely why she was very like almost passive in her parenting. I love my mom. She's literally the best. But she was also like, do what you want to do, like have fun. And it put me in some not really great situations plenty of times. So definitely did not grow up in a religious household, but I do remember throughout all of it, especially when I was 8 and feeling sick and feeling scared every night, I prayed every single night. I just didn't know what I was praying to. I just kind of like, at first it was just God, and I would just pray, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know anything about the Bible. Eventually, come to like high school, I prayed like such a high schooler. It was like, dear God, universe, mother nature, higher power, whatever it is. Literally started every prayer, like that exact quote. Um, so I always knew that I wanted something higher, something bigger, that I needed something higher and something bigger, but I never knew what it was because it was never a part of like my family or culture in my house or anything like that.
Well, it's beautiful that that's sort of, yeah, you had said before in the way you see it, like God was with you the whole time. And so it's almost like the relationship was deepened. It's not that it wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, you're also a mom, and so you've experienced pregnancy and motherhood now. How did that, change your relationship with your body, or affect your recovery, if at all?
It was big. I mean, I think another huge turning point in my recovery was trying to get pregnant. I never had a cycle until I was 26, and it was the cycle that got me pregnant. Again, I just think only I only think God can really like um just like explain that. It was really wild and unexpected, but I did try for about a year and a half before that to get pregnant. I wanted it so badly. But I didn't even have a cycle. So I was like, it just might never happen. I'm 25 years old and I don't have a cycle. And um but I did have to do a lot of like really deep digging of like, where am I still maybe holding on? And I was still exercising, a little too much, even though I, felt like I was perfectly recovered and fine. And so there was cutting back I had to do on exercise, more that I had to eat, weight that I had to gain. Um, and I got that cycle and I got pregnant. So that was a huge turning point. And to me, pregnancy was like the opposite of what I would have ever expected. In terms of like body image, because it was the safest and most comfortable I've ever felt in my body, at least since I was 8 years old. Because all of a sudden my body wasn't this thing that was just like mine, which is scary because of like, I think a lot of those like deeply ingrained, like, the self-hate and the struggles that still just like linger in the background, even though I know how to control them. So all of a sudden my body was like a home to this thing that I had wanted for so, so long and prayed for and just desired. So I felt so comforted by that, like this amazing little miracle, just like living in there. I felt so comfortable throughout all of pregnancy. And then if anything, the hardest part was like after I had him, it felt like the postpartum depression hit hard because it felt like this deep emptiness because it was like, whoa, I feel so safe. I have this thing in there. My body's a home to this miracle. And now it's not in there anymore. And now I'm stuck with just myself again. And like, that sucks. In that like moment in those like early days postpartum, like the postpartum was way harder, and not really body image, like feeling like, you know, I need to lose the baby weight. That was never a thing for me. It was more just like that emptiness of I'm stuck alone in my body again. Um, was really hard to kind of come by. So I had to really dig deep for that. Um, but yeah, it definitely was. I did not expect to feel as safe and comfortable and wonderful in a body as I did, just knowing that it was a home for someone else and it wasn't just me anymore.
And what you're saying too, I think that's such an important part of eating disorders that gets misunderstood. It's not just what you look like, and it's not a fixation on just how I look. There's like a way deeper well of emotion and relationship with ourselves that goes on.
Oh yeah, well, way deeper for
Yeah,
sure.
I think the other thing you brought up in there that's a big part of recovery is like sometimes it's like, oh wow, I got to this place, and then life happens and there's a change, and then it can feel super disappointing or frustrating to feel like, wait, I'm back at this place. Obviously, it's not, there's no such thing as going back. It's just a new place that maybe is familiar. And so, what was that like for you to navigate maybe the feelings of disappointment or frustration in that time that I felt like you went back?
Yeah, it was frustrating. It was almost like, because it was that like pull of like, I don't want to go back. This has nothing to do with like, you know, how I look or anything like that. It's just like, it was really a lot of work I had to do on me in terms of like, how do I not feel so unsafe and alone in my body when I have, my precious son that like I've, I prayed for and wanted right here in the room with me, and I have my husband, and I have all of these things. I'm working as a therapist at this point. How can I like get out of this pit? And again, it was really coming back to like that faith of, again, redefining my body as well. Just in, knowing I'm not alone in my body. Again, within my faith, it's my body is a temple for the Holy Spirit. So I think really falling on, before it was falling on just like the word and God and Jesus, but then it became like, well, now I need to build a relationship with the Holy Spirit, knowing that my body is still a temple for that. And that did have a really big shift in terms of not feeling alone in my body anymore. And then I think just like from a physical standpoint, just a lot more like physical touch, like more time with my baby, like really holding in those moments of like breastfeeding and holding him and letting him sleep on me and whatever, instead of pushing it away or letting feelings of not being worthy or not being enough rule over that. So just really redefining, again, finding safety within my body in any way I could. And also just not letting that upsetness with myself spiral me even further, because I think that's really easy to happen, is like, oh, I'm having like a lapse or these thoughts are really strong again. That means I'm just back to square one. So that's where I'm going to let myself be. I think really, really trying to hold on tight to not allowing that to happen was really important too. Knowing it's just like you said, like it's a different season. It's a different part of my journey. It doesn't mean that I'm backwards to square one or to square three or whatever.
And your husband is obviously another important person to you, and has been part of this process. And I think in eating disorders, there can be a lot of like pulling back, isolation, deception, hiding ourselves away. And so, what was it like to open yourself in that way to a person, especially with the eating disorder still being present for you? And how did you do it? That's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think it was, I don't even know. Like he's just very patient, and he's very wonderful. He's very open to coming back and having conversations. He also like basically told his whole story to me, and opened up about his faith and a bunch of things to me from the very beginning. And I was like, okay, clearly this guy like wants something serious. So I need to kind of open all these doors at the very beginning too. Like even before we got married, there was the conversation of like, I've never had a cycle, we might not be able to have kids. Is that something that you're okay with. Like, there had to be a lot of these conversations because I think both of us were in a place where we had walked really difficult journeys, and we want someone that's going to be okay with all the messiness that comes with those journeys. I mean, I have a stepson. He had a 3.5-year-old son at the time that we met. Now he's 10, almost 10. Like, and had a lot of really difficult relationships, difficulty in his job, running his own business as a music producer, and difficulty financially. And so just all our different messiness and just being open with it from square one instead of all of a sudden these doors coming down, I think was important for sure. I know sometimes it is hard and he does need to on, fall on God, fall on his brothers, to help, get through. And, but I think definitely, it is his patience and willingness to be a part of it. And it's not easy and it's scary, but if someone's loves you, they're going to love every part of you, even the messy, even the hard, even the, maybe not as pretty and perfectly put together, but no one is perfect. So I think just remembering that when it comes to your story and opening up to that person that you want to be with about it.
And I'm really glad that you two found each other and you were willing to go there with someone, because it's one thing to meet someone and then open that door, but another to be willing to do that and walk through it with them.
Yeah, absolutely. He helped. He was like, I'm going to tell you everything right now. I was like, cool.
I'm going to give it all to you right now. Yeah. So when you were going, and this is sort of backing up, I know, in your life, but when you were in residential treatment centers, were you willing to go there in that way with people? Were you not ready? Or what do you feel like worked for you there and what didn't?
I struggle. I think just with residential, the biggest benefit it had for me was the physical piece of the healing. Didn't do a ton for the and behavioral, but it didn't do a ton for like the overall like identity, because I think a lot of times in treatment it's really easy to put the emphasis on the external things going on, so on body image and food. My disorder was never really about body image, and so it was kind of got murky and lost and stuck, and almost made me think I had a lot of body image struggles when I really didn't. And so that's one of the things that like I try to like change with my clients, is like a really big emphasis on like, I know this program right now might be really focusing a lot on food, and I'm going to let the dietitians and medical doctors do their job. You and me, we're going to dig deep and we're going to talk about how the heck you can feel safe in your body and where you can find an identity apart from this eating disorder. So treatment has had its benefits. Absolutely. Some were better than others. But I do think in general, treatment needs to have some more focus on like the root causes going on, at least from the mental health therapy side, a little bit. But I will never not give it credit for saving my life physically and behaviorally, helping me know I'm capable at least of like not doing those behaviors, even if I wanted to go crazy in the moment. So
that's a really good description of like breaking it down more of like there are valuable pieces, but yeah, a lot of people do describe it's tailored to certain people, certain experiences, and eating disorders are much more than obviously the focus on body image and appearance. So of course, in therapy, we talk sometimes about like stages of change and our readiness and preparation for changing a behavior. What were maybe some big like light bulb moments for you? Of course, they don't necessarily look that way, but were there any big turning points for you?
Yeah. I think um I think there were definitely different ones in different ways. I do distinctly remember a like process group in treatment, clinical director just kind of sitting there. It was like my last time in treatment. So like 5th time in treatment at that point, and just like sitting down and just basically like yelling at me, but in the most loving way. Like, you are like love. And I don't remember everything she said, but I remember that. And that was the first time my brain went to like identity. Like, wait. like I'm more than just like this eating disorder, because that's what like everyone's made me feel like I am for like ever. You're saying I'm something else, and you're like lecturing me about me being like something else. Like that's crazy. So that was a really big piece for sure. Um, I would definitely say, um, I mean, I do think that my time in bodybuilding and CrossFit played their own role in that those stages of change in terms of it put me in the action of I don't want to restrict anymore. I don't want to overtrain anymore. I want to perform well and like look well for the stage. But yeah, my identity still was in nowhere good, like not a good place. Meeting my husband was huge. Wanting to do it, needing to do it for something bigger and something else. And the love that he gave me and the grace that he gave me in the midst of it reflected that that's possible. Like someone can give me this like grace and this love with all my like lack of worth that I am in my mind. Like this is crazy and I don't understand it, but he did. So definitely being with him and wanting to like not hurt him by like just leaving when he'd make breakfast or not eating his pastas that he'd make. He's very Sicilian. And so that was really big. And just knowing like, I guess I am worthy of being loved, even if I don't see it. Giving my life to my faith was a humongous shift for me, probably the biggest because it gave me like that safety, that identity, and something bigger to trust on and fall on, and an actual word, an actual thing, the Bible scripture to go to when those thoughts were running wild in my head of you're not enough, no one loves you, you're not worthy of love, you're nothing but bad. So I think that was really big. Wanting to get pregnant, like I said, was big. It really had to make me dig into the nitty gritty of the last little details, even though I thought I was totally fully recovered. And then having my son was like that other piece for sure.
And you've worked with a lot of teens and families and your mom. And so that's such a different angle to look at, when we're talking about eating disorders and maybe raising a child who is experiencing one. So what are maybe some of your recommendations to parents who are supporting their kids going through this?
Yeah, it is hard. And I remember I've had a conversation with my mom now, sense of like, what would you have done like differently? Like, what did you wish you knew? Her biggest thing was always having her own support. You cannot do it alone. It is your own type of trauma. Like, I know there's so much caring for your kid, but it is your own type of trauma watching your kid die, like it's scary and feeling like you have no control because like my mom always said, like, I literally had no control over how much you ate. No matter how much I tried, I didn't have control over it. So I think kind of surrendering that control and instead of putting yourself in the driver's seat of like, I need to control everything my kiddo is doing. I know it's really scary. And I know there's the pieces of like, yes, follow what their dietitian says, follow what their medical doctor says. And also along that journey while you're doing that, making sure that like those experiences when you're eating or experiences outside of eating are providing a sense of safety. So like sitting there staring at them eat this portioned amount, making sure it's this exact amount that, this person said, and staring at them and looking really anxious and dinner being so full of tension. Try, and I know it's super hard to make it not full of tension because again, a lot of eating disorders drive back to lack of safety. And if the eating environment doesn't feel safe, it's really not going to help. And I think doing things with them that help them find another piece of identity. I remember there was one point where my mom took me horseback riding. It didn't make me recover. I think I went to treatment another 2 times after that, but it stands out in my mind of like, it was a really good memory in the midst of like some of the darkest times. And so consistently doing things that help the kiddo rebuild a sense of identity in something else. That could be as simple as like going through old like photo books with them and like, remember when like we did this thing and like you used to love this thing, and just really helping them find their way out of that identity, because it's really easy as a parent to almost make it more their identity because you're so scared and every moment is scary and you're just trying to help them out of that. Their brain is already consumed by that. And so I think as much as you can, like being able to step out with them and help them find who they are, who they have been before their eating disorder, and not almost fueling this narrative that like you are your eating disorder. is really important. And again, why I focus on like make sure you're getting your own help and support too, because that's not easy to do. I'm not sitting here saying that's easy. It's extremely hard. So making sure you're having your own support so that you can be that person um, for your kiddo.
And identity, you've brought that up a lot of times, and I think that's so spot on. And working with clients is like them finding these things outside of the eating disorders is really transformative. And how do you mitigate? Because obviously perfectionism can be a big part of eating disorders. And so when someone maybe steps out of the identity of eating disorder and is trying to get into something else, whether that's relationships or some activity, like how do you maybe protect yourself from falling into the perfectionism shame trap with something different or new?
Yeah, it's hard. It's one of those things that I think you'll never be perfect at. When you have that like perfectionism, that drive, it's hard, and it might be a piece of things, but again, it's being able to come back and like give yourself grace when you're not perfect because no one can be. Um, but I do think a big piece that I've seen a lot of change with clients, is this aspect of like core values. And so what not only what are your core values, but what does it genuinely look like to live in alignment with them? And there's so many different ways. So it doesn't need to be you're perfect at one thing in order to live in alignment with the value of adventure or family or whatever it may be. Like there are multiple different ways to do this. And so in your life, what does it look like to live in alignment with what you value? And there's also, we might not be in alignment with all, let's say we have 5 top core values. We might not be perfectly in alignment with all of them at the same time. But if there's at least one that like something that you're doing is like really in alignment with that, it can feel really good and give you that peace of like, okay, I'm doing something. I'm somehow I'm playing a part in the identity that I think is really important to me and in alignment with what matters to me at the end of the day. So core values are a big piece. And again, like any higher power, like you can find it that is really game changing because at the end of the day, we aren't going to be perfect and there's no possible way. And so like finding a way to like come to that knowing like I don't need to earn anything. I don't need to earn perfection because it's not possible. I don't need to earn worth because it's not possible. I already have it. It's kind of like inherently in me, is really important. So core values, um, you know, higher power, faith, I think are really important when it comes to identity, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And what do you wish you had known at different points in your recovery? And what would you say to people who are struggling now?
I mean, it's hard. I struggle I always struggle with that question because it's like I know that I needed all of it to get to where I am now. And I don't want other people to have to go through all that. So what I would say to someone is I mean, I think just knowing like there's more to your story. There's so much more to your story. This doesn't need to be the end because all the things that your mind is telling you, making you think it needs to be, are so false and so not true. And there's really no evidence. There's not a single person that can earn worth because it's such a subjective term. So where does your worth really lie? I think is really big. And I think just having acknowledgement of like, there is more behind just body and behind just your appearance. There's more, there's more to this. And so try to get to the root of that. That doesn't mean that we need to dive into deep trauma work when you're still really, really struggling or still really low weight. If anything, it's probably not the best thing you can do, but at least just know there's something more, there's something deeper, and your struggle is totally valid. And with even though it's valid, it doesn't need to be the end of your story. So keep fighting for what you want the end of your story to be. And it might not end up being exactly that, but it'll definitely be something beautiful if you keep fighting to get there.
Yeah, it's sort of in some ways like the series of choices and making a choice towards what you want, even if it's not happening at this time.
Yeah. What you want, what you value, anything like that.
And What do you see for yourself moving forward in your life and your relationship with food and your body?
Um, I mean, now a lot of it comes down to my son. Like I really through everything that like I learned in eating disorder treatment when it comes to health and nutrition, as well as from like the days of struggling with like orthorexia and things like that. It is a value. Like I love health. I'm very, very passionate about it. And I have a whole different idea of what health is than I did, when I was struggling. And so building like a genuinely roundedly healthy kiddo. And that means health above and beyond just food and nutrition. That means health relationally, health socially, health environmentally, health spiritually. Um, there's so many different aspects of health. And if you just focus on one, even if it's the one that everyone tries to focus on of just food, nutrition, physical, you're going to be so struggling in health in other areas. But yes, so raising a very whole roundedly healthy kiddo is a huge um, motivator of mine, a huge goal of mine, having more kiddos to do the same. I think that's a really big piece. And I think just helping people find just like this, find their way to healing and of themselves. Because for me, that is a big piece of that identity and that core living according to my core values is helping other people do the same. It definitely feels like I'm fulfilling that like purpose, that identity per se when I'm doing that. So I think that's a big piece. Since I've found that balance, with my body, with food, with things like that, helping my son do the same. Hopefully more kiddos that I have in the future do the same. And in my work, helping people heal the same, whether it be from an eating disorder or something, another coping mechanism they're using to find some sort of control, identity, safety in their body. Um, you know, anything like that.
And where can people find you work-wise? Like, what are you up to nowadays?
I'm in a weird transition spot. I mean, I have, my solid job right now. I work in residential up in like North Apache Junction, like in the mountains up there, called Avery's House. We work with everything. So we're general mental health, substance use. We do see a lot of eating disorders because eating disorders are everywhere. Typically, those are ones I work with, just with my, background in that. So it's a general mental health facility. I work with teenagers, and I do see myself working with teenagers for at least the foreseeable future. It's a population I really, really love. Um, but I am, as of this Friday, I will have gotten like all my supervision hours towards my independent license. So of course, it's still going to be a process from this point of, submitting the application, taking the exam, actually getting the licensure in my possession. I also love just like the vibe and the values of the company I work for right now. So I don't see myself just like running away the second I get an independent license. But with the independent license, I mean, I do want to do more with eating disorders. And I don't know if that necessarily means just as therapy. I would like to dig a lot more into like research and advocacy, especially with how misunderstood they are. And how how minimal options of treatment there are for eating disorders and how scared most professionals are of eating disorders. I really just want to find a niche that's really able to help that. So if that is being a therapist that specifically works with eating disorders, or if that is more like a macro level management, advocacy piece, I'd be interested in that. I also do see myself like working with churches and things like that because of my my strong belief in faith helping through any mental battle and challenge and things like that. So I don't know exactly where I'm going to go with that, with the independent license. But for now, I'm at a residential called Avery's House in Apache Junction, Arizona.
Well, you can find Carina, sorry, information and details under the video link. And please do look for her and follow her career because she's already amazing and will continue to be so. So, Carina, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and being so vulnerable. It means a lot to me personally, and I know a lot to a lot of other people.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me.